Revenge Tales presents The Debt Collector, a story of patience, ruin, and settlement in full.
Part 1. The night everything was stolen.
He took everything from me in a single night. I spent 11 years returning the favor, one piece at a time. Arjun Mehta was 31 years old the night his partner stole his life. Not metaphorically, not in the way people say it to be dramatic. Vikram Sood walked into their shared office at 11:43 on a Tuesday evening, transferred every rupee from their joint company account to an offshore shell registered in the Cayman Islands, forged Arjun's signatures on 2 dissolution agreements, and by morning had quietly sold the intellectual property of their 7-year-old software company, NexCore Systems, to a competitor for 4 crore rupees. Then he disappeared. It had all begun so innocently, as betrayals usually do. The two had met at IIT Bombay in 2003. Vikram was sharp, charming, the kind of person who could sell ice to a glacier. Arjun was the architect, quiet, obsessive, brilliant with systems and code. Together, they were perfect. Vikram raised the money, Arjun built the product. For 7 years, they were brothers. When Arjun arrived at the office that Wednesday morning with 2 cups of cutting chai, he found the locks changed. The landlord, a rotund man named Mr. Desai, who smelled perpetually of camphor, told him that the lease had been transferred effective midnight. The new tenants' representatives were already inside. "Mr. Sood sends his regards," said the man at the door. He wasn't smiling. People who deliver catastrophe rarely do. Arjun stood on the pavement outside their Bandra office, his office, the one he had painted himself, the one where he'd once slept on the floor for 3 days debugging a payments API, and felt the city continue around him as if nothing had happened. Crows argued on the telephone wire. An auto rickshaw farted blue exhaust. A child somewhere was laughing. He called Vikram 47 times that day. He counted. He called lawyers who told him the paperwork was airtight. He called their investors, who had already received a letter from Vikram explaining that Arjun had chosen to exit. He called his mother, who began to cry. He called his bank, who confirmed that his personal savings account linked to the now dissolved business entity had been frozen pending a regulatory audit that Vikram had apparently initiated 6 weeks prior as a precaution. By evening, Arjun Mehta had no company, no savings, no office, no credit access, and because Vikram had also apparently sent a carefully worded email to their entire professional network, no credibility. The email was a masterpiece of subtle character assassination. It expressed sadness about Arjun's instability, referenced difficult behavior and financial irregularities, and wished him peace and healing. It was the kind of email that couldn't be directly refuted because it never made a direct claim. He sat in a Versova cafe until closing time, drinking water he couldn't really afford, and understood 3 things with crystalline clarity. First, Vikram had planned this for at least a year, perhaps longer. The regulatory audit, the offshore account, the buyer's agreement, the forged signatures, none of it was improvised. Arjun had been systematically set up. Second, the legal system would likely fail him. The paperwork was too clean. The money was offshore. Vikram had a 3-month head start on the narrative. Third, and this was the thought that arrived last and stayed forever, he would not go to the police. He would not file a civil suit. He would not weep publicly or appeal to fairness. He would collect what was owed, every single rupee of it, plus interest, and it would take as long as it needed to take. He allowed himself 72 hours to grieve. He spent them in his tiny Andheri flat, the one asset Vikram hadn't been able to touch, being in Arjun's name alone, eating biscuits, staring at the ceiling, and cycling through the 5 stages of grief at roughly 3 times normal speed. By Friday night, he had burned cleanly through denial, anger, bargaining, and depression, and arrived at something that was not quite acceptance, but was colder and more useful, a kind of settled fury. On Saturday morning, he made a list, not of his losses, that was self-pity, and self-pity was now a luxury he could not afford. He made a list of everything he knew about Vikram Sood.
Part 2. The Architecture of a Man.
A man is not just himself. He is his vanity, his fear, his reputation, his relationships, his secrets, his future plans. He is everything he has built and everything he still wants. To destroy a man, you don't attack the man, you attack the architecture. Arjun had 7 years of proximity to Vikram. He knew things that no lawyer, no enemy, no journalist could know. He knew that Vikram had a compulsive relationship with status, that a single public humiliation could spiral him into paralysis. He knew that Vikram was terrified of his father, a severe Punjabi industrialist named Harshvardhan Sood, who had never fully respected his son's entrepreneurial path and held the purse strings of a considerable family trust. He knew that Vikram had a habit of exaggerating his role in NexCore's technical achievements, taking credit for Arjun's work in investor meetings, pitching himself as a product visionary when pitching his next venture. He knew that Vikram, in the privacy of their shared work, had said things about clients, investors, and employees that would, in the wrong hands, be professionally annihilating. He knew that Vikram had, in 2010, signed a non-disclosure agreement with a former employee named Priya Chandra that had not been honored, and that Priya had quietly filed a complaint that had been settled and buried. He knew because he had been in the room when Vikram had laughed about it afterward. Arjun wrote all of this down in a notebook, not digital, not traceable, and then he did something counterintuitive. He put the notebook away, in a shoebox, under his bed, and he got a job. The job was at a mid-size fintech company called Dharma Capital, where he took a position as a junior back-end developer, 3 levels below what his experience warranted. He told no one who he was. His LinkedIn had been scrubbed. Vikram's email had seen to that. He was, professionally speaking, a ghost starting over. This was in fact precisely the plan. Arjun understood that Vikram expected one of 2 responses: legal action, which would be fought and likely lost, or public outrage, which would be dismissed as the behavior of a disturbed co-founder. What Vikram did not expect, what no one would expect, was silence. Complete, absolute, uncanny silence. In the absence of noise, Vikram would relax. He would begin to believe it was over. He would build his next chapter. Already, Arjun had heard, Vikram was pitching a new venture called True North Analytics, positioning himself as the visionary behind NexCore. He would grow comfortable. He would make new promises to new people. He would create new dependencies, new relationships, new vulnerabilities. And Arjun would watch and learn and wait. The first year was the hardest. Not because of the material deprivation. Arjun had grown up with very little and found he could easily return to it. The hardest part was the silence. Every time he saw NexCore's technology rebranded under the competitor's name, every time he read a profile of Vikram calling himself a serial entrepreneur,
Every time a mutual acquaintance awkwardly avoided him at a conference, the white-hot urge to act was almost physical. It lived behind his sternum. It woke him at 3 in the morning. He channeled it into code, into learning, into building, invisibly, a second life.
Part 3. The long game begins.
In the second year, Arjun made his first move. It was small and it was clean, and it left no fingerprints. Vikram's new company, True North Analytics, was seeking a Series A. The lead investor on the term sheet was a Mumbai VC firm called Indus Horizon, whose managing partner, a meticulous woman named Sunitha Rao, was known for exceptional due diligence. Arjun had worked with Sunitha briefly during the NexCore days. She was, he remembered, particularly interested in IP ownership history. Arjun wrote her a letter, not an email, a physical letter, typed on plain paper, unsigned, mailed from a postbox in Pune. It contained a single document, a time-stamped version history from NexCore's internal code repository, data Arjun had backed up to an encrypted personal drive the day before the lockout, for reasons he could not have articulated at the time, but would later understand as instinct. The document showed, clearly and incontrovertibly, that the core predictive algorithm Vikram was now presenting as the foundation of True North had been written entirely by Arjun. Every commit, every line, every annotation in Arjun's meticulous, distinctive commenting style. The letter suggested that Sunitha might want to independently verify the IP chain of title before finalizing the term sheet. The Series A was quietly withdrawn 6 weeks later. Vikram released a statement citing strategic realignment. Arjun read it over his morning chai and said nothing to anyone. In the third year, Arjun had rebuilt enough credibility at Dharma Capital to be promoted twice. He was now leading a team, still under the radar, still unrecognized in the broader industry, but he had money again, enough to breathe, enough to fund the next move. He hired a researcher, not a private detective, those left trails, a freelance journalist named Kavita, who worked the Bengaluru tech beat and was known for her investigative work on startup fraud. He didn't tell her about Vikram. He hired her to write a general feature on how early-stage Indian startups handle IP agreements with technical co-founders. He paid her well and gave her one specific lead, Priya Chandra. Priya, it turned out, had not forgotten. She had, in the intervening years, left the industry, had a child, returned, and was now running a small UX consultancy in Hyderabad. When Kavitha found her, Priya was initially reluctant, but she was also tired of carrying it quietly. The NDA, it turned out, had a clause that made it invalid. Vikram had signed it without consulting the company's own legal counsel, and the consideration offered had never actually been paid. A detail the original settlement had glossed over, perhaps assuming Priya wouldn't notice. She had noticed. She had just been waiting. Kavitha's piece ran in a respected tech publication 14 months later. It didn't name Vikram specifically in the headline. It didn't need to. The account was detailed and damning. A co-founder who had systematically undermined his technical staff, appropriated their work, and buried complaints through legal intimidation. Within the industry, the identification was instantaneous. Vikram posted a furious rebuttal. It was, Arjun thought, far too emotional. It confirmed what the article implied.
Part 4. The Father.
The fourth year brought the move Arjun considered his most precise. It required no subterfuge, no anonymous letters, no third parties. It required only a meeting. Harsh Vardhan Sood, Vikram's father, was a man Arjun had met exactly twice, both times at awkward NexCore milestone celebrations, where Vikram had visibly performed for his father's approval and received in return the particular coolness that powerful fathers inflict on sons they've never quite believed in. Arjun had felt almost sorry for Vikram those evenings. Almost. Harshvardhan was in the construction and logistics business. His company, Sood Group, occasionally needed custom logistics software. Arjun was now, through Dharma Capital's network, connected enough to arrange a pitch meeting. He pitched clean, honestly, and effectively. The contract Sood Group awarded Dharma Capital was medium-sized and perfectly respectable. But that wasn't the point. The point was that Arjun was now in a professional relationship with Vikram's father. And over the following 18 months, as the project progressed and he was invited to quarterly reviews at the Sood Group offices in Nariman Point, Arjun gradually became someone Harshvardhan trusted. Not through manipulation, through genuine competence and discretion. He never mentioned Vikram. He simply did exceptional work. One evening, after a review meeting that ran late, Harshvardhan invited Arjun for a whiskey. The old man was proud of his palate and pleased to have found someone who could hold a conversation about single malts. They talked about the industry, about technology, about reliability in business partners. At no point did Arjun raise the subject of his son. Harshvardhan did. "You know," the old man said, swirling his glass, "my son is in this field, tech startups. You must know of him, Vikram Sood." "I've heard the name," Arjun said, which was the most technically true statement he had ever made. Harshvardhan's expression was the particular blank-faced disapproval of a man who is choosing not to say what he is thinking. "He's had some difficulties, a bad partnership," he says, "someone who embezzled." Arjun said nothing. He sipped his whiskey. "You know," Harshvardhan continued with the slightly too careful tone of someone testing a theory, "I sometimes wonder if it was the other way around. Vikram has always been," he paused, "better at taking credit than at earning it." Arjun looked at the old man for a long moment. "I think," he said carefully, "that good reputations are built over time. Eventually, the truth of a person becomes very clear to anyone who is paying attention." Harshvardhan studied him, then nodded slowly in the way that men of that generation nod when they have understood something they weren't told directly. 3 months later, the family trust's annual capital allocation to Vikram's ventures was, by all accounts, quietly halved.
The Unravelling.
By the 6th year, Vikram's world was fraying at the edges in ways he could not identify the source of. True North had survived its early stumble. He'd pivoted, raised from smaller investors, kept going through sheer salesmanship. But it was never quite what it should have been. The algorithm at its core was imperfect, because the core had been Arjun's, and Vikram had never truly understood it, only presented it. Every new technical hire eventually left, frustrated by a founder who couldn't be questioned. The company was a facade with no structural foundation. Meanwhile, in a quiet office in Lower Parel, Arjun had been building something new. Not at Dharma Capital. He had left them gracefully, with references, after 4 years. He had started, alone, a small company called Meridian Software. No fanfare, no press, no networking events. Just product, just code. Just the same obsessive, meticulous architecture that had made NexCore worth stealing in the first place. This time, every piece of IP was locked, every commit documented, every process audited. Arjun had learned. Meridian grew slowly, then not slowly at all.
It grew the way things grow when they are built correctly, through referrals, through reliability, through the quiet reputation of someone who did exactly what they said they would do. By the time industry publications noticed it, it was already too large to be ignored. In one profile piece, the journalist asked Arjun about his background. "I had a previous venture that didn't work out," he said, "which taught me everything I needed to know about what to do differently." He smiled when he said it. The journalist described the smile as serene. In the 8th year, an opportunity arrived that Arjun had not manufactured but recognized immediately as the kind of thing you cannot force and must simply be ready for. A very large conglomerate, Barrett Digital Ventures, was looking to acquire a mid-size analytics company to build out their enterprise software division. Their shortlist contained 2 names, Meridian Software and True North Analytics. The due diligence process took 4 months. Arjun's documentation was flawless, clear IP ownership, clean financials, a technical team that sang his praises, a product that did exactly what the sales deck said it did. The auditors finished their review in 3 weeks and sent a letter that contained the phrase, "exceptional operational clarity." True North's due diligence, by contrast, uncovered the kinds of things that tend to surface when a company has been running on narrative rather than substance for 8 years. The IP chain on the core algorithm was murky. There were questions surfacing again about its original authorship. 2 of True North's largest claimed client contracts turned out to be letters of intent that had never converted. 3 former senior employees, when interviewed separately, gave accounts of the company's culture that were consistent with each other and deeply unflattering to its founder. Barrett Digital Ventures acquired Meridian Software for a sum that made Arjun's early investors exceedingly happy and made Arjun himself, at the age of 42, very comfortably wealthy. True North was not acquired. It was, instead, quietly put into a holding pattern, too distressed for a serious buyer, too much liability to shut down cleanly. Vikram retained a nominal title, but no real authority. The investors who had backed him were tired. The staff had largely moved on.
Part 6. The Letter. 11 years, 3 months, and 4 days after Vikram Sood had changed the office locks and sent that gentle, devastating email to their professional network, Arjun Mehta sat at a desk in his now very nice flat in Bandra West, 2 kilometers from that original office, and wrote a letter. A real one, by hand, on plain white paper. He had thought about this letter for a long time. He had written drafts in his head for years. He had imagined versions that were cold, versions that were cruel, versions that catalogued every wound in forensic detail. What he actually wrote surprised him. Vikram, I have spent 11 years settling what you took. I want you to know that it is now fully settled, with interest. I do not hate you. Hatred requires ongoing investment, and I have made better use of my time. What I want you to sit with is this. You made a decision in 2011 based on the belief that I was someone you could discard. That assumption was your only real mistake, not the theft. Theft is at least honest about what it is. The mistake was the assumption. You looked at me and saw someone small. I hope the next person you partner with is also not small. I won't be writing again. Arjun. He folded the letter, sealed it in a plain white envelope, and posted it to the last known address he had for Vikram, an address he'd verified with no particular difficulty 3 weeks prior. He wasn't sure Vikram would read it. He wasn't sure it mattered whether he did. The point was that he, Arjun, had written it, had ended it on his terms, in his words, at a time of his choosing, had not waited for an apology that was never coming, had not needed one. He later learned, through a mutual contact, without seeking the information, that Vikram had moved to Pune with his wife, had started a small consulting firm of no particular consequence,
and had reportedly become someone who did not like to talk about his startup years. That he had developed, so the contact said with some puzzlement, a habit of checking over his shoulder. Arjun found he did not want to know more than this. The picture was complete. The account was settled. He poured himself a whiskey, a good one, a single malt he'd become fond of, and walked out onto his balcony. Below him, Bandra West went about its evening. Crows, autos, a child laughing somewhere in the building. The city unchanged and indifferent, as it had been the morning he'd stood on a pavement with 2 cups of chai and felt the ground disappear. He had not taken the shortest path between the 2 points. He had not been quick or loud or visible. He had been patient in the way that rivers are patient, moving always, accumulating force, shaping stone without announcing itself, arriving eventually at the sea. He drank his whiskey. It tasted, he thought, exactly like enough.
And that is the story of the debt collector. 11 years. Not a single wasted move. If it stayed with you, it was meant to. This has been Revenge Tales. Thank you for listening.